Everybody always says don't overreact to week one with the players that disappoint. People say don't panic on Harrison, don't panic on London, they will do better. But also it works the other direction, right? We can't just overreact on everybody that had a strong week one performance thinking that they're set up to crush in the long term. Some of these guys, if you can take their hype and potentially look to pivot off and sell them highly, it would be something that I'm interested in. Now, of course, you can see the Texas wall behind me, hook 'em horns. I am sorry, but I think Xavier Worthy is a perfect example of a sell high candidate after week one. He looked incredible. 2 touchdowns in his NFL debut in the league's best offense with the league's best quarterback in a primetime game that every single person and their mom was watching. Literally, my mom texted me during the game, "That Worthy kid looks fast." Thanks, Mom. I really appreciate it. I'm going to use it in a video. But regardless, if you are looking at Xavier Worthy and trying to map out his actual projections going into the future, this is a wide receiver that we should 100% expect to get better and more involved in this offense as time progresses. You're not expecting a rookie wide receiver to be less involved as his career progresses. No, he's going to be more and more involved. But his starting point here is the man had 3 targets in week one. He had 3 targets and came away with 2 touchdowns. Now you can take that as, oh my gosh, imagine when he gets 10 targets, he's going to be scoring 6 touchdowns a week. I mean, if it happens, bravo, I'm very happy for the guy. But the reality is, what you're more likely than not going to see is you're going to see the efficiency dramatically fall off with Xavier Worthy. And what we've always looked at with Worthy is he is a field stretching wide receiver that is going to be extremely valuable for the Chiefs offense. He's going to make safety attention and he is going to make defensive coordinators focus in on him and try to take away the deep play. And that's going to allow a lot of space underneath for this running game, for Travis Kelce, as well as for Rashee Rice. But reasonably, can we expect Xavier Worthy, a wide receiver of this prototype, to consistently see 8 or 9 targets per game? I think that would be extremely difficult to project, even though I do admit he will be more involved going into the future than he was in week one. But you also have to consider the fact that Hollywood Brown is going to be coming back into this offense. Now, I was on Xavier Worthy all offseason over Hollywood Brown. So in underdog drafts, I have a ton of Xavier Worthy. I may or may not have just overpaid for Hollywood Brown in the Flock League. I feel like an idiot for it. I'm sorry if you're rooting for me in that league. I know I fumbled the bag. But regardless, I do think that Hollywood Brown will have a role when he comes back into this Kansas City Chiefs offense. If you look at the deployment of these receivers, it does appear that Rashee Rice will be the wide receiver that is soaking up all the target volume close to the line of scrimmage. And if you just try to have some realistic expectations for Xavier Worthy, going and looking at his underdog pick'em for week 2, they have Worthy higher, lower 43.5 receiving yards. And this is a spot where it's not easy to say higher, 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 just because he only had 3 targets in week 1. I don't think he's startable in the short term. I think he still has upside in the long term if we consistently see him expand his role, even with the addition of Hollywood Brown. But if you're able to cash out now and you're able to take Worthy in a bench piece and pivot over to an alpha wide receiver such as DJ Moore, I think that's a call that I honestly would very easily make. Now, of course, if you wanted to say, well, Mason, Xavier Worthy is going to have easily 43.5 receiving yards this week, you can go find that pick on Underdog Fantasy, of course. And if you wanted to check out any of those pick'ems over on Underdog, you can find the link in the description and comment section. Code FLOCK will give you 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, Code FLOCK will actually get your team reviewed from yours truly over there on flockfantasy.com for free. Just make sure that you have an account set up on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your Underdog Fantasy account. And also, you're going to get a free CeeDee Lamb special pick'em, more than less than half a total yard. There are college football discounts dropping Saturday, NFL pick discounts dropping Sunday. Make sure you take advantage. I won $250 on Underdog last week, not because I am any good at pick'ems, just because I took advantage of the promos they were offering. But let's go over to our next player. This is somebody that's going to be in a garbage offense, and he is going to eventually be the backup in said offense, Jerome Ford. Now, I 100% believe that Jerome Ford is a running back 2 in every single week that Nick Chubb misses. Because you look at the underlying volume, Jerome Ford has almost everything here. I mean, Jerome Ford in this game played 57 snaps in comparison to Pierre Strong at 18. Jerome Ford had 12 carries in comparison to Pierre Strong at 2. Jerome Ford had 7 targets in comparison to Pierre Strong at 3. Jerome Ford is the 3-down running back in this offense. Now, with that being said, Jerome Ford kind of gets lucky near the end of the game with some of these garbage time points. And if you look at the expectations for this offense going into the future, right now Vegas sportsbooks are telling us to prepare that this is going to continue to be one of the worst offenses in the NFL. If you go ahead and look at this, they have a 19-point implied team total going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars this week. We'll see if Underdog has a pick 'em out on Jerome Ford just yet. They have Jerome Ford at 48.5 rushing yards, higher or lower. So if I'm looking at this, I think Ford is just capped because of the overall offense over the next few weeks. And then you have to consider the fact that when Nick Chubb does come back, Jerome Ford will literally be nothing. So if you can cash out on Jerome Ford right now, I mean, if you can take him and pivot over to a running back that maybe is a little less exciting in the short term, such as Najee Harris, and not have to worry about the long-term addition of Nick Chubb, I think that would be very, very interesting, because what's funny is when we look at these guys that are short-term injury fill-ins, what actually happens is when they start producing, their value goes up, even if it means that the starter is actually a little bit closer to returning. Now, going over to our next guy that we are going to be looking at here, we are going to be diving into Stefon Diggs. Now, going into the season, I was team Stefon Diggs over Tank Dell. It appeared that that was a hot take for whatever reason, so I ended up with a ton of Stefon Diggs in underdog drafts, not much Dell, but honestly, I don't think week 1 was something we can victory lap. Because if we go through and if we look at what you had from Stefon Diggs, I was expecting him to run significantly more routes than Tank Dell based off preseason usage, where it looked like Tank Dell was almost just getting used in 3 wide receiver sets. However, in week 1, Stefon Diggs runs 35 routes. Tank Dell runs 34 routes. If you actually look at this chart from PFF, you will see that Tank Dell is out there and Tank Dell's playing a very high percentage of this game. And if we go over and look at this tweet that I found from Jacob Gibbs, you'll actually see that the intended air yards for each one of these wide receivers in week 1, you had 112 in the direction of Nico Collins, 105 in the direction of Tank Dell, and only 9 intended total air yards for Stefon Diggs. Diggs was just being used right at the line of scrimmage, not really running real routes like these other wide receivers were. And if we look at where the majority of his points came from, I mean, the majority of those points just come straight up off the touchdown volatility. Now, we know touchdowns are going to be extremely volatile going into the future. It is extremely difficult to project those. So I would love to sit here and go, oh my gosh, Stefon Diggs is now the wide receiver 1 in Houston. That's not close to being true. Nico Collins is the alpha wide receiver. Stefon Diggs, I still slightly do prefer over Tank Dell, but it's not like week 1 was something that makes you think, oh, okay, this is 100% going to be the case going into the future. If you could take Stefon Diggs and pivot over to a wide receiver like Brandon Ayuk, pivot over to a wide receiver like Marvin Harrison Jr., if for whatever reason one of those owners is panicking, I think that'd be an absolute no-brainer move. Now, player that I have in the Flock League, and I am really hoping that nobody in the Flock League is watching this right now, because I'm going to be honest with you, I'm going to include Ramondre Stevenson in some trade offers this week. I may actually do it in this video so we can hopefully get an offer accepted before this video comes out, and they may hear my little spiel on him, but they know I am trying to get out on Ramondre, and the explanation is very simple. While Ramondre Stevenson had a phenomenal week 1 on my bench, sadly, but starting week 2, we have to understand the game environment that this happened in. The New England Patriots got out to a lead. The Cincinnati Bengals weren't able to do anything at all, and the Patriots led this game from start to finish. That's a game environment where they're able to lean on the run. They're able to just go, okay, Ramondre Stevenson, you are our best offensive player. Despite us having one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL, we're going to go out there and we are just going to give you every single touch. You're going to get 25 carries out of this backfield. You're going to pick up 3 receptions as well. You're going to have almost 30 touches in this game. But going into the future, realistically, what we can expect from this New England Patriots offense is for them to be one of the worst offenses in the NFL week in and week out. For this team to be trailing significantly more games than they are leading. And also, I'm a little afraid in that type of game environment, you may see an expanded role for Antonio Gibson. Not only did Antonio Gibson have an extremely small role based off, I don't know, the overall game environment, But at the same time, Antonio Gibson was a player that we didn't even know if he was going to be good to go dealing with his injury. Now he's another week removed where it looks like Gibson is healthier and may actually have a slightly larger role in this offense. So if I'm looking at this, I think that you just have to be very hesitant with the touchdown upside of Rhamondre Stevenson. Right now, if you look over there at Underdog, I mean, he has a higher, lower pick'em of 64.5 receiving yards. You do have a touchdown multiplier on him where you are actually getting an additional 1.2x odds. And I don't know. It's just so damn tough to be excited about the running back that is in a committee in one of the worst offenses in the NFL. Now, speaking about running backs that will be in a committee in one of the worst offenses in the NFL, I also think that Aaron Jones will be playing in a different game environment going into the future than what he was just able to see against the Giants. Going into the future, the Vikings will be underdogs in the majority of their contest, similar to them being almost touchdown dogs to the San Francisco 49ers this week. And Aaron Jones will have to rely on the receiving upside that he has, specifically in a full PPR format. Now, to be honest with you, I think the receiving upside is still there. I mean, you go back and you see in week 1, he does have 2 targets, 2 receptions, 15 receiving yards. But Ty Chandler actually has 3 receptions for 25 receiving yards. You go through and you actually look at the split here between Ty Chandler and Aaron Jones. According to PFF, this isn't a very clear situation. On third downs, you had 3 snaps for Ty Chandler, and you had 1 snap for Aaron Jones and 1 snap for Myles Gaskin. So if we get a worse game environment and just fewer overall points scored in Minnesota going into the future, I think Aaron Jones will be at threat with Ty Chandler actually eating a little more into this workload and just the touchdown upside not necessarily being as exciting as it was previously. I mean, if you go through and look at the higher lower on Aaron Jones this week on Underdog, they have him higher lower 49.5 rushing yards. They go higher lower 13.5 for his longest rush. So I don't know. I think it's just an easy spot to say committee back, bad offense. When the offense looks good week 1, you should probably go through and sell high and say it's not always going to happen. And similar story here in Tennessee. Now, I was team Tony Pollard over Tyjae Spears all year. With that being said, I can't victory lap week 1 because Tennessee was in a very different game environment than what we should expect going into the future. Week 1, the Tennessee Titans were up 17-0 to the Chicago Bears. If we look at this from PFF, you will see that Tony Pollard played 32 snaps on first and second down in comparison to 8 snaps from Tyjae Spears. Tony Pollard was the early down grinder, which is an extremely valuable role in an offense that's going to score a lot of points, an offense that hopefully is going to be winning the majority of their games. Whereas Tyjae Spears, on the other hand, played 12 of the 13 third down snaps. Tyjae Spears played all 5 of the snaps in the 2-minute drill. And going into the future, this Tennessee Titans offense is an offense that you should not expect to lead the majority of games. This is a team that will be dogs in the vast majority of their matchups. I'm not just saying that based off what happened week 1. You go back into where we are looking at coming into the season, and I want to remind y'all, a lot of people hated us for saying this, but sportsbooks were projecting out the Tennessee Titans to be the 5th lowest scoring offense in the NFL this season. Pollard is still definitely a valuable back if he would have that third down role and he would have that receiving upside, but it looks like that may be more so going in the direction of Tyjae Spears than we would actually like to admit. Now, our next sell high candidate, extremely exciting. I for sure moved him up my rankings. Like, don't get me wrong. A lot of these players that had very strong week 1s, they did move up my rankings. I just think if you can pivot off to a player that maybe is a more solidified option, you should. Jamison Williams, great week 1. Now, I'm going to give him his flowers here. Not only did Jamison Williams lead this team in receptions, not only did Jamison Williams lead this team in receiving yards, not only did Jamison Williams lead this team in receiving touchdowns, but Jamison Williams also led this team with targets, with 9 targets in comparison to Amon-Ra St. Brown with only 6, in comparison to Jahmyr Gibbs with only 6, in comparison to Sam Laporta with only 5. And I'm going to say this for a fact right now. Jamison Williams will be a more efficient wide receiver than Amon-Ra St. Brown from a per target perspective this season. Jamison Williams will average more yards per reception. Jamison Williams will average more yards per target. Jamison Williams is that field stretching wide receiver that we saw at Alabama, that we saw early on in his NFL career, and that we are seeing now as well. He can be a great NFL wide receiver. He can stretch NFL defenses. He can have an extremely high average depth of target, and when he does pop, he's going to have that long receiving touchdown. He's going to look unstoppable, and he's going to look like one of the best assets in fantasy football. And y'all know I went heavy on the Detroit Lions offense this year. Vegas was telling us it was going to be the second highest scoring offense in the league. Back-to-back weeks now, they've had the highest implied team total of any team in the NFL. So I like investing into this Detroit Lions offense. But if we look at the larger sample of games that we have, the guys that are actually going to be commanding consistent volume from a week-to-week perspective, Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs, Amon-Ra St. Brown, these are going to be the guys that are seeing targets from Jared Goff underneath. Jamison Williams is going to allow them to be successful because Jamison Williams is going to make sure that the safeties have to keep back. He is going to take that attention from the defensive coordinator to make sure that Jamison doesn't blow by their defense and just blow the game up in favor of the Detroit Lions. But we've seen time and time again, there are very, 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 very few wide receivers with this prototype and with this role in the NFL that actually translates over to fantasy football production. The best example everybody always gives, and he's the poster boy for this, but he never comes around, is Deshaun Jackson. Yes, Deshaun Jackson was able to do it a decade ago. But 9 times out of 10, these guys are going to provide more real life value than they're going to provide fantasy value. I think Jamison's particularly a sell in a full PPR format where you only start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex. In a non-PPR league, Jamison will be a little more exciting because you don't necessarily need the reception volume. But I think that's all I have for you. I really hope I was able to help you out with this. And of course, if you have not done so already, hit that like, subscribe if you play fantasy football. And if you wanted to check out any of those pick'ems that were in this video, or if you want a free team review over there on flockfantasy.com, just make sure you go deposit $10 on Underdog Fantasy with code FLOCK. You can find that link in the description. You can find that link in the comment section. Code FLOCK will give you a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Get a free CD Lamb pick, more than less than half a total yard, and a free team review on flockfantasy.com. So make sure you take advantage of that. But thank you again. Really do appreciate you, and really hope I get to hang out with you after the Thursday night game tonight.